Imagine your government banned alcohol tomorrow. Completely. No exceptions. Would people actually stop drinking? America tried. The result wasn't a sober nation. It was bootlegging, corruption, machine guns. Decades later, psychologists discovered a mental reflex that could explain why. A reflex so predictable, you can trigger it with a child, a candy bar, and a single word, no. In 1920, nobody knew it existed. They wanted a sober country. Instead, they created the perfect conditions for Al Capone to build an empire. To be fair to everyone involved, this wasn't a law written by villains. For decades, reformers, churches, and groups like the Women's Christian Temperance Union had watched alcohol wreck families and workplaces. They built a genuinely popular movement to end it, and they weren't wrong about the damage. Alcohol really was tearing through American households. When the 18th Amendment came up for a vote, 68% of the House said yes, 76% of the Senate said yes, 46 of the then 48 states ratified it. This was not a fringe idea. This was one of the most popular laws in American history. On January 17, 1920, it became real. Alcohol, production, sale, transport, all of it, illegal, everywhere in the country, all at once. That same year, in Brooklyn, a 21-year-old with a scar across his cheek was working as a small-time enforcer for a neighborhood gang. Nobody outside a few city blocks had ever heard of him. For a moment, it actually looked like the law was working. Consumption fell hard, down to roughly a third of what it had been before the ban. And then something started moving in the opposite direction. People didn't stop wanting a drink, they just got creative. Winemakers began selling something called a wine brick, a solid block of concentrated grape juice, completely legal, with a printed warning telling buyers exactly what not to do. Don't add water. Don't leave it in a dark cupboard for 3 weeks, or it will turn into wine. The warning was the recipe, and it turns out this strange reaction has almost nothing to do with alcohol. Doctors started writing a suspicious number of prescriptions for medicinal whiskey. Pharmacies filled them without blinking. And in kitchens and bathtubs across the country, people distilled their own liquor, badly, in makeshift stills. Bathtub gin became a household term almost overnight. Something strange was happening, and it shouldn't have been. Take away the supply, and demand is supposed to fall. That was the entire logic the law was built on. Every reformer who voted for Prohibition expected the country to slowly forget alcohol had ever existed. Instead, the exact opposite force had started growing. And then it stopped being about kitchens and bathtubs entirely. Secret bars called speakeasies opened in almost every American city, often with police protection, paid for in cash. Smugglers ran boats across the Great Lakes from Canada. Entire shipping routes appeared, built overnight around a product that had been perfectly legal 12 months earlier. Small-time street gangs, the kind that had always existed, running minor rackets over a few city blocks, suddenly found themselves sitting on top of the most profitable business in the country, including the one in Brooklyn. That enforcer with the scar moved to Chicago, took over his boss's operation, and within a few years was pulling in close to $100 million a year. His name was Al Capone. And here's the part that's easy to miss. Before Prohibition, the term organized crime barely existed in America. There were gangs, there were criminals, but there had never been anything worth organizing on that scale. No product that nearly every adult in the country wanted, that only criminals were allowed to sell. The law didn't just create a black market, it created an industry, and the force driving all of it was already sitting in every human head, including yours. It just had never been handed a target this big before. On February 14, 1929, 4 of Capone's men, dressed as police officers, lined 7 members of a rival gang against a garage wall in Chicago and shot them. The press called it the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. By the end of the decade, the homicide rate in major American cities had climbed to roughly 78% above where it stood before the ban began. So how do you accidentally create someone like Al Capone? Was alcohol simply that irresistible? No. Most of the people buying wine bricks and bathtub gin hadn't been heavy drinkers before the ban. Were Americans just unusually rebellious? No. The same pattern shows up again and again, in places with nothing to do with Prohibition, nothing to do with alcohol, and nothing to do with America at all. The answer wasn't hiding in a courtroom, or a distillery, or a garage in Chicago. It was hiding inside the human brain. Imagine you're 6 years old. There are 5 candy bars on a table in front of you. An adult smiles and tells you that you can pick whichever one you like. Then, right before you reach out, they point at one of them and say, "Anyone except that one." Which one do you want now? In 1966, a psychologist named Jack Brame ran that exact experiment, and the children didn't simply accept it. Across repeated versions of the test, the forbidden bar consistently became the one they wanted most. Not because it tasted different, not because it looked different, because they had just been told they couldn't have it. Brame gave that reaction a name: psychological reactance. Here's the idea. Every person walks around with an assumed set of freedoms: what to eat, what to buy, what to say, what to drink. You never notice them, because you've never had to, until one of them is taken away. The moment that happens, the brain doesn't just register disappointment. It produces a specific, measurable urge to reclaim the freedom that was taken, usually by doing the exact thing that was just forbidden. Which is why the child reaches for the one bar out of 5 they were told not to touch. The other 4 are still sitting right there. They're still free, but they're no longer the point. It isn't really a decision. It behaves much more like a reflex. Now, multiply that reflex by 100 million adults, all told the same thing, about the same substance, on the same morning. You don't get a sober country. You get the most profitable illegal industry in American history, and a young man from Brooklyn sitting right at the center of it. Once you know the reflex is there, you start seeing it everywhere. It's why the friend you forbid your teenager from seeing becomes the most important person in their life. It's why the ex who says "don't contact me again" is suddenly impossible to stop thinking about. It's why limited edition works on people who weren't going to buy anything at all. It's why a book gets an enormous spike in sales the week somebody tries to ban it. And it's why, if you put a large button in a public square with a sign that reads "Do not push," you already know exactly what's going to happen to that button. Every parental "you're grounded," every "this content is not available in your country," every advertisement built entirely around the phrase "banned in." All of it is pulling the same lever Jack Brame found in a room full of children and candy bars. But here's the part most people get wrong. Reactance was never really about wanting alcohol, or candy, or an ex-partner. It's about protecting freedom itself. The brain doesn't seem to care very much what the specific freedom is, only that it's being taken, without permission, without a say in the matter. The forbidden thing isn't the goal, it's the proof. Reaching for it is how a person demonstrates, mostly to themselves, that the choice is still theirs. Prohibition didn't fail because Americans loved liquor more than anyone else on earth. It failed because 100 million people were told no, all at once, with zero say in the decision. And reaching for a glass became the cheapest possible way to prove they still could. Which is also, conveniently, where the fix lives. Reactance research keeps finding the same pattern. Give people a choice, even a small, almost symbolic one. Give them a reason they can actually weigh for themselves. And the reflex weakens dramatically. People rarely resist a request. What they resist is the feeling of having no say in it at all. It's the difference between "you can't have that, and here's why, and here's what you can have instead." Same restriction, completely different reflex. So imagine, one more time, that your government banned alcohol tomorrow. You already know what would happen. Not because you're unusually rebellious, not because anyone loves alcohol quite that much. And that's the unsettling part. Al Capone wasn't created because America loved alcohol. He was created because millions of ordinary people all felt the same tiny reflex, at exactly the same time. And that reflex is still in your head, sitting quietly, waiting for the next person to tell you no.